welcome to another episode of Civil Rhetoric. Today, we're going to get into a series in which we call Uncomfortable Conversations. Today, we have Felicity joining us. She is a person who has experience and understanding of the sex work industry, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, about the industry itself, so that we can kind of destigmatize these ideas and conceptions that we have of people. One topic that she did bring up that I actually would really like to get into myself is discussing the terms of race and how that relates into different things along the lines of sex work, but also just in general in terms of the outlook that the American general public kind of puts on us. So, speaking as a black man myself and seeing that she is someone who is not of Caucasian descent, I think we'd be able to have a very interesting conversation here today. We're both in Southern California area, so that's going to be on the West Coast without being too actual direct about it. And we'll go ahead and get started. Felicity, welcome, and please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Felicity. I'm actually from San Francisco, California. I
Oh,
I don't mind disclosing that I live in San Francisco. Um, I was born in Hayward, which is about a 30-minute drive away from San Francisco. I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area my entire life, and I knew I wanted to be a sex worker from a young age. And when I was taking an economics class in high school, my teacher had us all research our desired career job, um, and find the average salary for that. And so I'm pretty sure when this assignment was assigned, a lot of numbers were either antiquated or just it's not nowhere near average. Um, I chose dancer, which is an extremely vague profession. There are, go-go dancers who dance at Electric Daisy Carnival. There are strippers. There are people who dance in musical theater at, community theater shows. There are like backup dancers for singers. There's just it's so hard to find an average for somebody within like a niche in the dance industry, much less an average salary for the entire dance industry. But basically, my economics teacher was like, you're not going to be making a living wage if you choose this job. And I was so sad. And so I divulged to one of my classmates, who was also a best friend, that I just wanted to do sex work. And at the time, I was like, yeah, I'll just do online sex work because that's what I was most familiar with. And I started doing online sex work when I was 18, only about 3 weeks before my 19th birthday. And I did not have any guidance. I didn't have like an experienced friend in the business take me under their wing. So I was just bumbling around. And in March of 2018, I started doing in-person sex work and professional cuddling. No, I did not have anyone take me under their wing for in-person sex work, nor for professional cuddling. So I was doing the best that I could. I had very little information available. Um, Back in 2018, a majority of the very few resources for professional cuddling was paywalled. So I started doing professional cuddling because I needed money. I could not afford the upfront costs. And when people ask me what training, what education, what certifications have I acquired for cuddle therapy, I tell them, I'm going to be honest, I did not take my first ever boot camp until February of 2023. And by then, I was already a seasoned professional cuddler. It might sound strange to say that I'm a veteran, a pro cuddler, when I've only been doing this for 5 years, but people get burnt out very quickly. In 2018, I think the burnout rate was 2 to 3 months, and then you would never see that person again. And when I talk to people who have been cuddle therapists for longer than me, they're like, yeah, when I was starting out, I was labeled a veteran when I had only 6 months of experience because a lot of people don't stay in this industry for long. And I do have a podcast about professional cuddling. It's called Pro Cuddle Hustle, and I created it in late 2019 because I recognized a necessity. People need free resources for this extremely esoteric industry. And I do make some money off of my podcast. It's extremely minuscule. Like, it doesn't I do not know how many thousands of dollars I've spent so far on my podcast, but just know it's in the thousands. And um, one of the things that I'm currently working on is a website for my podcast, and started working on the skeleton of the website in June of this year, and it's September now. It's still not accessible to the public, but a lot of blood, sweat, and tears is being invested into it because I deeply believe in helping other people out. And I harbor no negative feelings towards people who charge for mentorship, but I just want to help people for free for as long as I possibly can. Like, I am currently staying in a hotel with another professional cuddler, and something that we are offering is duo cuddles. I've never done a duo cuddle session before, but it's it's something on my bucket list, and I want to explore this modality as much as I possibly can. And I don't really jive with professional cuddlers who are anti-sex work. I refuse to platform those kinds of professional cuddlers on my podcast. I I am very blessed to say that I now am financially stable enough to sponsor things. Like, my podcast is sponsoring this dance competition in Toronto in November. And this is the competition's inaugural year, so it's the first of many. And that's very exciting. And I didn't even do like the basic tier sponsorship level. I chose to be a silver sponsor. So I paid $600 to be a sponsor. And I really admire the coordinator of the dance competition because she's a black stripper, and she recognized that strippers are very often excluded from dance competitions, which is strange because strippers have invented so many dance moves that people know and love. And so it's a requirement to be a stripper to compete in this competition, and it's a requirement to be a stripper to judge this competition. So I don't know if there's any other dance competition like this. And I I I want to be an event coordinator like Onyx, who is the person coordinating the dance competition. I want to host retreats in California, and I want to lead workshops. I mean, I attended this one international convention in Baltimore in June, and I spoke on a sex worker panel, and that was very exciting because there were other panelists who were from the San Francisco Bay Area, but then there are also sex worker panelists from the UK, from Australia. People traveled all the way from Australia to Baltimore, Maryland to be a part of this convention, and it just warms my heart that there are people out there uniting sex workers, especially sex workers all around the world. And it's just, solidarity is beautiful, and I will always be all about solidarity.
I can understand that. Do you, at times with being involved in the sex work industry, do you kind of feel forgotten and alone? I mean, it like, from what I'm hearing you say, it does feel like it's an underserved community, especially
Mhm.
since it's one of the oldest professions in the world, if not the oldest profession. Why there's still no type of solidarity, as you mentioned, there's still no opportunity for, open discussion, even amongst the workers themselves. I understand that it's so stigmatized, but is that what you're attempting to do? You want to make it to where it can be a healthier environment, especially with putting on workshops. That's something I'm 100% up for myself. I can also relate to the fact that you spent so much money on your podcast. I myself have also spent thousands of dollars. I've actually built this entire studio inside my basement. And on top of that, I mean, I haven't even released my first episode yet. So I can relate to, investing that money and kind of plopping that down. But I as well, I'm looking to do this. I'm a recent father. My wife and I had our first son, and my goal is to leave a world that's a little bit better for him than it was for me growing up. And then also to kind of, I figured the only way to do that is to touch the underserved communities. That would include men, that includes women involved in the sex work industry. But on top of that, it includes making accountability a thing again, and that goes for both genders, but especially men. I think we're kind of in this environment that we are in today, because men are complaining about their specified role in the world, and they don't feel, as if they deserve the amount of accountability that is placed on them. Uh, I myself disagree with that. I think that a society full of better men leads to a better society, because they don't let bad men run amok. And right now in our society, we have a culture that's okay with, rape and things of that nature. And I don't say okay like they promote it. I say okay as in they remove the power from victims in situations and they keep them victims versus turning them into survivors.
Mhm.
And I think that that does start with our male population. I myself, when I was younger, I used to love going out and hooking up and doing all those things. And now being 38 and able to kind of look back on my life, I realized that a lot of that was a waste of time for me. I wish I had devoted more of my time towards personal development so that I would have been further along in life, you know, versus where I'm at now. Thankfully, we're in a situation to where my wife, who was also a worker, we were doing 50-50 bills. But moving forward, we wanted to make sure that one of us could spend time with our son. We saw that I had more earning potential. I don't want to say better, just more earning potential. So she's decided to step away from her career and was going to focus primarily on raising our son while I focus on supporting her in any way that she needs. One thing that does allow me is, I get to work from home. I love to invent things, so that actually allows me to do hobbies from home that I then turn into, means of financial gain, and it allows me to have conversations like we're having today. Once I, reached out to you and you reached out and you agreed to the podcast, I wanted to make sure that my wife was okay with it because I didn't want to have her think that I was trying to sneak and do anything around her back. And she's like, "Of course." And she's like, "I trust you." And I'm like, "Well, even more than that, it's just another person." And she's like, "I understand." She's just never had this exposure in her life, so I understand that as well. And one thing I kind of wanted to focus on that you had mentioned was when you got into the cuddling industry, that there was no resources to teach you that were not free. And it kind of strikes me as odd because having an industry that I assume people tend to venture into because they need money, you would figure that there would be at least some type of write up. I mean, anything that would provide that information versus leaving someone out there to source it because of the implied danger that can exist within the industry, I assume.
Mhm.
I basically did 2 days of research on this. I don't know much about cuddling, so any information that you have and would like to share, I'd be more than open to hearing it.
Unfortunately, there's not that many resources. If you go on Amazon or Goodreads and try to look up books, all you get are books with diagrams of various cuddle positions. Yes, some professional cuddlers are indie authors. It's wonderful, but a lot of their books are not specifically about cuddling. They're just pro cuddlers who happen to also be authors. And I want to do that one day. But one of the knee jerk reactions that people get is, well, what if you get sexually assaulted? Which is a very valid concern. I've been sexually assaulted. I mean, I wish platforms did more to protect cuddle providers from sexual assaults. one of the most recognized websites in the world for cuddle therapy, and the one I started out on, is Cuddle Comfort, and they're only about profits. They don't really care about people's well-being, and I don't have any fear in saying that. I mean, I'm already banned from the website. What else are they gonna do? Sue me? They're gonna need my legal name, or I don't know if you can do a Jane Doe in that. I'm not a lawyer, don't take legal advice from me, but, um, I have no fear or shame in calling out cuddle websites and companies that are doing horrible things to professional cuddlers. I s I will stand by other individuals every single day until I die. I will do that always before I defend a company, because capitalism is shitty. Businesses exist to make money. They're not. I mean, yes, cuddling itself is supposed to make you feel better, but when you infuse capitalism into it, like with every other thing, it it can turn something wonderful into something horrible. Like, so many artists go to art school because art is their passion, and then they either drop out of art school or they graduate and they're like, "I fucking hate this because it just all feels like chores to me. It's no longer fun." And that, like, a question I don't often get is, does your job make you enjoy platonic touch less in your personal life? And thankfully, it doesn't. I am so, so grateful it doesn't. Um, Thankfully, the sexual assaults that have happened to me at work are not really affecting my personal life. I mean, it's been several years, so I've been healing for several years. I've also gone to therapy, and um, on the topic of domestic violence, September is considered Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and October is considered Domestic Violence Awareness Month, or Domestic Violence Prevention Month. Hopefully, I'm getting the words right, but um, I I'm also a model, so I kid you not, yesterday, a photographer in Sacramento reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I'm doing this photo series for October about um, surviving domestic violence." And so I, as a teen, have seen photographers do photo series where rape victims hold up signs with words that were said to them right before they were raped. I've heard about museums where where rape victims donate the clothes that they were wearing to the museum and it's on for display. Me personally, I don't think I could walk into a museum where every single exhibit is someone talking about what they were wearing when they were raped, but I am comfortable with participating in a photo series in which I meet with other domestic violence survivors. We talk about what we've been through and we create art out of it. It's like it's like lotus flowers growing through the mud. Yeah, shitty things happened to us, but we are going to prosper anyways.
I can see that. Would you mind if I make an observation? This is in no means an attempt at trying to be harmful or hurtful to you.
Mhm.
I hear the way you speak about sexual assault, especially happening at work. You speak of it with a little bit of familiarity. When you were younger and you decided you wanted to, venture into the sex work industry, was that a result of previous traumas that opened that doorway to you, so to speak?
Oh, um, well, I have very strict parents, and I wanted to start working at a young age. I actually got my first job at 17. I was working at a wedding venue, and I loved that job. It just only paid $11 an hour, and I spoke to my parents, "Hey, can I get a job outside of the town we live in? Because the minimum wage outside of our town is higher." And my parents were like, "No, you're not allowed to get a job outside the town you currently live in." And I I will say I did grow up in a high income suburban neighborhood, and I thought, well, if this is like an affluent suburb, wouldn't the minimum wage be higher? Can't the local, like the city government afford to pay higher for minimum wage? And my parents were like, well, in in the suburbs, there's not as many jobs available as in cities. Also, when when a majority of your residents are working minimum wage, there's a greater incentive to have a high minimum wage. If a majority of your residents are already doing pretty well financially, and very few of them are working minimum wage, then you can get away with only paying $11 an hour. I'm like, I hate math, but it's less of math and more of I hate what capitalism has done to humans as a collective. And so um I worked several jobs, several vanilla jobs like retail and childcare, and I did start dating someone when I was 20, and after we had been together for about 1.5 years, I decided to move in with him. It was his first time also living with a girlfriend, and so we were so jovial, and I I started applying to strip clubs within maybe a month of moving out of my parents' house, and I got hired at my first strip club in May of 2021. It was extremely strict. There was like no flexibility. And a lot of strip club managers will use excuses like, well, you're not an independent contractor, you're an employee. Therefore, I get to fucking control your entire life. And that's how I was treated at my minimum wage jobs. Managers would be like, well, you're my employee, so I can tell you how to live your life, basically. And so I was like, fuck it. In the state of California, what was it, in the year 2019? I forget, but in recent years, California has passed AB 5, which makes it so that a lot of gig workers, like rideshare drivers and strippers, are considered employees instead of independent contractors. And AB 5 has screwed over millions of Californians. And I know some people say shit like, well, when you're an employee, that means um, if you work a seasonal job or if you're unemployed, you can apply for unemployment checks. But
Exactly.
most people cannot live off of unemployment checks. And I think you have to prove that you are actively searching for jobs while you're receiving unemployment checks, which does make sense. But like at my first strip club, one of the bouncers, whom I got along with very well, he told me he was receiving unemployment checks while he was working at the strip club. And I'm like, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. I didn't, like, I have no idea how much the strip club was paying him, but he was like, yeah, I am just going to double dip for as long as I possibly can. I'm not going to tell uh, employment, what do you call it, EDD? I'm not going to tell EDD that they don't need to keep sending me checks. I'm going to double dip for as long as I possibly can because it is fucking expensive to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm like, amen to that. And so um, it's it's rough because there are a bunch of underground strip clubs like the one I'm currently working at where I'm technically an independent contractor because I'm not being given an hourly wage in the form of paychecks. I am just earning through cash. So
Kinda like
I
a booth at a barber shop, basically, like, they allow
oh
you to
yeah,
get
I
on sta
pay
okay.
to rent a chair at my workplace. It's and a lot of people ask me, "Oh, well, you have complaints about your current strip club. How come why don't you just start working in San Francisco strip clubs again?" And there are problems with literally every single job. Sex workers are allowed to complain about the negative parts of their job without being told, "Well, why don't you just work there? Why don't you just get this kind of job? Why don't you get a degree and then become a real estate investor?" Whatever. And the last gentlemen's club in San Francisco I worked at, this was 2021. So some restrictions from 2020 were like trickling over. So in 2021, my house fee, and I should clarify for your listeners, strippers have to pay a house fee, regardless of if we're employees, regardless of if we're independent contractors. All strippers in the US have to pay a house fee, which means we literally pay to work. Like, in addition to paying for parking, in addition to paying like a babysitter if we have kids, in addition to all these other things, like we literally have to pay to enter our workplace. And we're not being charged like the normal customer entrance fee. We are being charged like 4 times, if not more, the entry fee and for customers. And so when I was working at my last gentleman's club in San Francisco, my house fee was $100 on weekday nights and 150 on weekend nights. And I chose not to work weekend nights there. I chose to work at an underground place on the weekends because they were charging me only $50 for a house fee. And on slow nights there, they were like, "You know what? Just keep all the money you made. I get it. It's a slow night." And then my gentleman's club was bought out by a corporation. There are a bunch of corporations like Deja Vu, Rick's Cabaret, um, Spearmint Rhino. A lot of corporations will buy these independent mom and pop strip clubs. It sounds kind of kooky to say mom and pop strip club, but there are mom and pop strip clubs. And when that corporation Deja Vu bought out Crazy Horse Gentlemen's Club, my house fee spiked up to $150 on weekday nights and $300 on weekend nights. And I'm like, fuck this shit. I am
Oh,
not working here no more. I'm going to keep working at the underground places. And it sucks because if I were to stay there, my goal on Saturday nights would be I need to make at least $300 in lap dances so that the club will not fire me. Forget like being able to take home $300 for lap dance money. Like, that is my goal because I don't want to get fired. And if, say, I worked at a coffee shop, I'm pretty sure I would still get paid and I would not be fired if no customers walked in that day, or if customers did walk in that day and they were being stingy and chose not to buy anything. But that that principle does not apply to strip clubs. And this is why I think every strip club that does have employee strippers should unionize. Like, that is the real advantage to being an employee. You can fucking unionize. Like the what do you call it? The United Auto Rail Workers and the Actors Equity. I know there's a bunch of strikes going on right now with hotel workers and like
we
public
had
service.
UPS almost go on strike and
Like,
yes.
we're making history. Um it's just sex workers are in a really awkward position though, because there are some sex workers who are also working vanilla jobs, and then there are sex workers who are just doing sex work, and then there are some doing sex work and then we're also college students. And it's like, how do we fit into the picture? Because when there are student strikes at universities, oftentimes our voices get excluded. And I know it's like cliche, stereotypical to be like, oh yeah, that person became a stripper just so she could get a nursing degree. But it's true. A lot of us are attending college because we want to pursue maybe a corporate America job, but college is fucking expensive. So we're just going to use sex work as a stepping stone. I actually dropped out of college this year, and I had been in college for like over 5 years. I literally was doing full time academia in 2020. Like the lockdown really fucked with my mental health. Having to do college on top of that really fucked with my mental health. I barely made any money through sex work. It was all online, but shit was hard. And then I moved in with my ex-boyfriend, who later on became abusive. And it was hard trying to do classes whilst also living with him. And then 2020 came, and I was like, I'm going to take a year-long break. I know this is very shunned in Asian families, but I am going to take a year-long break from college. And so I returned to my college in January of this year, and then I caught COVID for a second time. I caught COVID for the first time in April of 2022, and then I caught COVID again in March of 2023. So I couldn't even go a year without contracting COVID. It took a huge toll on me. My boyfriend, whom I love and live with right now, somehow never tested positive for COVID. Like he took 4 rapid COVID tests whilst I was positive. And somehow all of them became negative. And I'm like, why the fuck are you the one who does not have as many boosters as me, and you don't mask like I do? And then I get
Some
and then
would
I get
argue
it.
that
Like,
that's
this is
exactly
so
why.
unfair. So
So
unfair.
some
And
would argue that that's exactly why, I myself, my wife, we've only had COVID once. We are not vaccinated, we're not boosted. However, we're not involved in large groups, very often, so that could have something to do with it.
mhm.
I do have a question that I find it interesting. So, is finding a partner while working within the sex work industry difficult?
I I say no because I think finding a mate is hard in general. I I don't like to think in binaries where it's like if you're in the adult industry, it's automatically hard to date, and then vice versa, it's automatically easy. Um, I will say COVID has probably complicated dating a lot. When I told my faculty that I had COVID and that I need some assistance, like, please extend due dates for all my homework, all of my group projects and whatnot. They're like, no, like we will acknowledge that you're positive for COVID, but you're not getting any accommodations. And of course, at the same time, I was also contracted by this one local cuddle company. This cuddle agency fired me whilst I was positive with COVID, which I think is illegal in California, but fuck that agency. So on top of being fired from a snuggle agency, I told my doctors and professors at my college, and they're like, "No, we're not going to accommodate you." And then I was like, "Okay, I guess I should start applying for food stamps because I think I'm going to drop out of college." And then I just got I like wrongfully got fired from a snuggle agency. I think I should apply for food stamps. And then food stamps were like, "No. No, because you live with your boyfriend and he makes enough money to feed both of y'all." And food stamps in California are shit, but I think they're shit in all of the US. And so it sucks because I was explaining to the CalFresh people, that's what they're calling food stamps now in California. I was like, hey, just got fired and I think I need to drop out of college. I also am positive for COVID-19, and I'm not getting any of those like prescription medicine to alleviate the symptoms of COVID-19. And also, boyfriend's HR just told him that his entire company is going to get liquidated. So food stamps did not give a fuck. And so this is why people like me turn to sex work.
So, when it comes to your involvement in sex work, has that kind of warped your view on I assume that the majority of your clientele are men. Has that kind of warped your view on men in that regard?
Yeah, I think men show who they truly are when they're with sex workers. I am of the school of thought or the camp that how a man treats sex workers is how he thinks of women in general. Like it sounds so sinister, but I really do think men as a whole treat sex workers the way they wish they could treat women without getting in trouble. Um, I am very happy that okay, I don't want to say sexual harassment in white collar workspaces is going down, but it seems like I've never worked a white collar job, but I think there are more and more um, protections for workers in white collar jobs pertaining to sexual harassment. Like my mom has been working white collar jobs for over 15 years, and she tells me, oh yeah, every single year I have to do this sexual harassment training. And my boyfriend, who works a white collar job, he's like, yeah, my company requires that every single person, they have to do this diversity inclusion training. These trainings are not perfect. They are far from perfect. My boyfriend has absolutely complained about his diversity and inclusion training. And of course, a majority of the people at his workplace are white men above the age of, I would say, 45. And he's like the only person of color in a, I don't want to say a 5 mile radius. There might be one other person of color at his workplace, but it's abysmal. It's abysmal. It's like change is happening gradually, but the status is still abysmal. I try to celebrate the tiny victories when I can. Like I'll admit a majority of the people I've interviewed for my podcast are white, and professional cuddling is still as white dominated in 2023 as it was in 2018 when I started. But for example, I have interviewed one Mexican person. Next week, I'm going to interview my first ever transgender professional cuddler on my podcast. And normally around June, that's when you see professional cuddlers come out as bisexual or come out as non-binary, and that does warm my heart. But in my personal experience, my sexuality doesn't really impact my business, so I don't really ask other people questions like, how does this impact your cuddle business? Because the answer is it doesn't really impact. I will say I could do better in terms of diversity for Pro Cuddle Hustle podcast, because there's a lot of male professional cuddlers, and even though I have met some of them in person, I've yet to interview one on my podcast, and I would love to do that. I will say cuddle parties. I mean, I haven't even touched upon that. Cuddle
Cuddle.
parties are getting more diverse. Like, don't get me wrong, they're still very white dominated, but like cuddle party facilitators are they're their own occupation, but a lot of them do happen to be professional cuddlers as well. And so if you go on cuddleparty.com and you click on their tab, Our Facilitators, a majority of people on their roster are white. But I am seeing more and more Black people become cuddle party facilitators. And actually, I put on my Instagram the other day, Pro Cuddle Hustle podcast is sponsoring this dance competition in Toronto. What other events should Pro Cuddle Hustle sponsor. And this one Black cuddle party facilitator reached out to me and was like, I think you should sponsor my cuddle parties. And so once the dance competition is over and done with, I'll finalize stuff with that person. And there are Black cuddle parties in LA. There are Black cuddle parties now in Washington, D.C. I'm seeing positive change within cuddle parties in the US in terms of race. And
So what is a cuddle party exactly?
oh,
Like,
okay.
does everybody just hug each other like human centipede style? Like, how does this work?
So there's this one company called Cuddle Party. I think it started in 2003, and it was started by this person named Marsha Basinski and this other dude, but he like stopped working with that company like a year or two in. And so Marsha's company, Cuddle Party, they have this robust training course. I think it costs like $1,000 to get certified. But the way a cuddle party works is that the facilitator has to get certified by this particular company. And so after they get certified, they get listed on the website. And when they host events in the US, cuddle parties typically last about 4 to 5 hours, and the first 90 minutes are a mandatory consent workshop. So I haven't been to that many cuddle parties in my life, but there are a decent amount in the SF Bay Area. And so you have to arrive on time. You cannot skip the mandatory consent workshop. And events normally, I mean, I've attended cuddle parties in people's homes. I've attended cuddle parties in like yoga studios. I'm sure there are outdoor cuddle parties where people just cuddle on picnic blankets. I'm not really someone I'm not someone who likes to cuddle on grass, even if there is a blanket. The last time somebody paid me to cuddle them on a picnic blanket was like 2019. I don't really do that anymore. And so I just feel more intimate in a private enclosed space. And I don't like hearing children scream and run around whilst I'm trying to get my snuggle on. I've done that before, not
Yeah,
again.
it seems a little off-putting to say the least.
Yeah, and I've researched the cuddle industry in other countries for my podcast. Like, I've done extensive research in Southeast Asia. And so over there, I'm like, why are the cuddle parties in Singapore only 2 hours long? Um, I try not to get too into my American brain and judge other countries, but I I am blessed to learn a lot about other countries, especially countries I've never been to, through the power of research and podcasting. Like, I recently interviewed my first ever Australian professional cuddler. I've yet to edit that audio, but when we consider all of the interviews I've completed, not published, but completed, I have interviewees in 3 different continents and 4 different countries. And when we're talking about the United States, I've interviewed people with cuddle businesses in 6 different states. And then, of course, in California, I've interviewed people both in, well, I guess I'm the NorCal representation, but I have interviewed people in San Diego. And so I would say I'm a decent researcher. I'm a, I'm a decent researcher. I'm a decent resource. I don't have any of the fancy certifications that cost $1,000, but I am very committed into making the cuddle industry more inclusive and more diverse.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I know that you don't have the greatest affinity for capitalism.
Mhm.
Why not start your own thing? Like, you understand the ins and outs of the industry as a worker and as someone who's actually helped and put together different, things, as well as being someone who's very familiar with like the strip club industry as well.
Mhm.
why not open your own club and allow the women a little bit more power and a lot less, money to be spent to work? Why not go that route?
Ooh, I am way more skilled with online businesses as opposed to standing businesses. Yes, I have event coordination experience, but that's mostly with modeling. I'll just rent out an Airbnb or Peer Space or a hotel room or whatever. And then I do a lot of vetting for models and photographers. I invite them in. We do some stuff for like 2 days at most. And then I probably never step foot into that Airbnb ever again.
I see.
I It's so different to actually have a space you have to pay rent for. And a question I get asked fairly often by other professional cuddlers is, why don't I just get an office in a business building, and therefore I don't have to pick different hotels and Airbnbs every single month. And quite frankly, I really do like renting a hotel room in San Jose 1 month and then one in Oakland and then one in San Francisco. I like having a change of scenery, and I have clients all over the Bay Area. So some are able to commute to Oakland, but San Francisco is too far for them, or they're able to commute to San Jose, but anywhere else is just too out of the way. And I got this job because I wanted to have a flexible work life. I don't want to have to pay rent for my house and rent for an office. I would feel pressured to never take a vacation if I had to pay 2 rents.
One thing I would just throw out there,
Mhm.
I've kinda have gone from, like, that same space mentally that you are in regards to that. I will say this out there. The city is, you know, potentially one of the most toxic places to be, whether it be spiritually, whether it be physically, whether it be mentally. Have you considered maybe get purchasing a home? That way you're paying mortgage, and
I
then
have thought about that.
yeah, I mean, like for us, I used to always have to rent a space out to do woodworking and things like that, or I never had enough space, like, for my soaping and things along those lines. When we purchased this home, when we found that it had a basement, I mean, half of the basement is a lab for me, and the other half is, like a music room relaxation studio for my wife.
Mhm.
You could have that as an option. They have properties that have that. Even if you bought a property with a couple acres, you can literally build a studio that you have for your cuddle sessions, and you can incorporate other forms of wellness like ionic therapy through salt and things along those lines, even saunas and hot tubs and cold plunges. I'm sorry, I'm just going out there because my
Mhm.
brother-in-law, he's really into wellness and he's actually a therapist, and he's looking to venture to his own business in regards to having like a mobile studio, which basically is a kind of like a box truck, trick the thing out, soundproof it, and then drive and perform, like therapy sessions at a beach or somewhere so that people have the opportunity to kind of get out there and be in closer with nature.
That is
Uh,
a very good idea.
yeah, he got it from me. So I'm just saying that out there.
My last therapist, actually, she had this tiny home in her backyard, and so that's where she would conduct her therapy sessions, and I'm sure she saved a lot of money through doing that. Good for her. Um, I personally don't like people knowing where I live, and even if they don't actually go through the front door of my place, even if they're going through the backyard door, I just don't want people knowing where I live, and I have been to several home dungeons before because I'm very involved in my local BDSM community. So I've seen what other people have done, and I'm like, this is very inspirational. And so if I ever become a homeowner, I'm definitely going to convert it into my BDSM dungeon. And I've seen dungeons where it's literally like the first floor is the dungeon, and then the second floor is where the residents live, and they'll just put a curtain concealing, not really concealing, the staircase that leads up to where the homeowners' bedrooms are. And I'm like, bro, I am not converting my future home into a dungeon like that, where if people want, they can just like peek their head through the curtain and be like, ooh, so this is where the dominatrix lives. Ooh, and like there's this one dungeon I love, and so it's huge. It is huge, and there's like so many segments to it. So there's the main dungeon where it's several kinky rooms, and the way the homeowner has structured it, it's like walled off. So like there's the front door to the main dungeon, and then there's her personal entrance to her own home. So there's no way you can like walk through this bathroom and then oops, now you're in the bedroom of the dominatrix who owns this dungeon. Like she very meticulously constructed this home. And then also her backyard has like a tiny home with both a first floor and a second floor. And then she's currently creating a basement, like hired several contractors. They did a lot of digging, a lot of excavating, and I don't know when the basement is going to be available for kinky sessions, but there's going to be a new addition to this dungeon that I love pretty soon. So that is the kind of home dungeon I would love to have. And then, of course, I would also use the dungeon for my other creative outlets like photography.
Awesome. So
Mhm.
now, in regards to, I guess, like the cuddle and just the sex work in general, because you have familiarity with like BDSM clubs and things along that line, um, are the workers within the industry, do they kind of have a like a group or a friendship together with each other to where there could be some type of group investment? Because I'm a person who does believe in unions.
Mhm.
However, I guess my outlook on humanity is not the most positive. I just kind of accept humans for what they are and what we are. I always say that like I'm separating myself, but I accept us for what we are, and I understand that greed is always going to come into play. So within my own personal community is I really like homesteading.
Mhm.
So my idea is to kind of get away from people having to spend all their money at grocery stores and maybe just kind of barter and trade each other, lemons, zucchini, cucumbers, things of that nature. That's kind of the direction I'm going. And it's having to establish that community so that we can have the means of communicating with each other. Within your community, I would assume that it's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk
Mhm.
about clients because I imagine they overlap at times. And I'm just curious as to, is there anything along those lines? Because I could see that happening a lot sooner than people who are making a lot of money allowing a union to exist.
Mhm. You have a urban homesteading podcast, don't you?
Yeah, we homestead
Okay,
as
I
well.
don't know if it's still
Yeah.
active. I haven't checked in a while. Um, I would probably start a company with friends before I buy a home with friends. Those are both on my to-do list, actually. I started talking to my friends a few months ago about starting a dance company because there's one dance company that has been around for 10 years that I really like is gonna close their doors
Oh,
in October. I'm sad. And so um the company is called Pole Presentational. Originally, it was called NorCal Pole Presentational, but then they started having online um, shows, and so they're like, let's just rebrand. And I am so fond of this dance company because there are so many dance competitions around. Like I've competed in some. I hate viewing other people as my competitions and then seething at the judges when they give me the lowest um, score, ranking, whatever. And I have so much respect for people who start dance companies to share their love of dance with other people. Not so that we can like view each other as competition, but just because we love this art and we want to share it with other people. And so that's what Pole Presentational has been for me. It's been an outlet for me to express myself, and they're closing their doors after 10 years, which makes me so sad. And I even emailed them saying, "Hey, can I like have your email list cuz that's 10 years of emails. That's a
yeah.
very valuable list." And they're like, "No, just start your own dance company." I'm like, "Fuck, man." So many dancers in the Bay Area would love to continue this, would love to take the baton and keep running, but they're like, no, we're 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 done. Damn it. And so I I already picked out a name for the dance company, and I am probably not gonna do any coordination for it until 2024 because I want Pole Presentational to have their last hurrah and like for that to settle down. And then I'll be like, y'all have been
Surprise.
tried, right? Let me be the answer to your prayers.
So with Pole Presentational, what's the reason they are going to be going out of business?
They're being very clandestine, and I should probably not start conspiracy theories, but I'm just going to assume that the owners are just too busy.
I see.
They've changed ownership several times throughout the years. The first two people, when they stopped, they passed the baton to other dance teachers, and those people were like, you know what, let's rebrand from NorCal Pole Presentational to Pole Presentational. And then those people passed the, you know, they actually bought plots of land and started building their dream homes from the ground up, and were like, this is very time consuming, let's just pass the baton to other people. And then they passed the baton to someone else who did not rename the company, but they were not the owner of Pole Presentational for long before they decided to close their doors for good.
Ouch. That's kind of terrible to hear.
Yeah.
One thing I will throw out there because I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we're at about an hour.
Mhm.
One thing, so I do want to be respectful.
Mhm.
One thing I will say is this was a very interesting conversation. It was informative for me because this is something that I'm kind of on the outside of. Most people would consider me a square, and I'm completely happy with being a square. It's something I'm very content with. I will say this. One thing that I'm good at is noticing patterns and observe and being observational. One thing I will say is you are a very sharp, smart person,
Oh, thank you.
and just like your mental fortitude, because the things that you haven't said, along with the things that you have said, have led me to understand and potentially believe that life has not been exceptionally easy for you. And despite going through a ton of different roadblocks, here you are today with dreams looking to move forward and do other things in life. So I'm very happy to hear that about you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love an opportunity in the future to kind of go further and dive deeper into some of these different subcultures, especially when it comes to like the cuddling idea of that, and then also the unionization of sex workers. I myself, I guess like my thing is I really enjoy people more than I do money, more than I do those things. My goals in life, they originally were like make lots of money, which I did when I was younger, and I realized that it's a very empty existence. And I've gotten to a point now to where we have a decent living, and I'm able to do things that I enjoy. And then even like my day job, my 9 to 5, I work for a company that's actually got amazing owners. And the thing that I see is I've also wanted to open up kind of like a retreat for people to find wellness, both mentally, physically, spiritually, especially when it comes to like the type of food that we ingest. And I've been working on this now for probably about 7 years, looking to buy a plot of land so that, like companies can rent it so that they can go there and host these retreats, or I can help host these retreats. And one thing I will say is I think there's a one really good book that you would benefit from. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's a book that deals with a lot of PTSD and trauma. That was something that I didn't even realize that I was suffering from myself. And also, I would look into, because our system, like capitalist system, the American system, just the world economy, it has a lot of people who are not the best people in control. So the rules and the things that get passed down are usually not going to be for the benefit of the all. Um, I would love for you to devote some of that sharpness, that hunger, that drive towards helping people that are in your situation. Like I would love to see you, get people to unionize, or even just open up your own business that crushes everyone else's because you actually put people over profits first. I know it's an ideal, especially like me in my head, like this is an ideal situation that people can be inherently good, as long as they can kind of remove from the programming that we get from the surrounding community of you need to have XYZ car, you need to have XYZ property, you need to have XYZ, watches or rings or jewelry, and kind of focus more on the person. So I have had an opportunity to listen to a couple of your episodes, and I can see that. Yeah, I try to research the people that I talk to make sure they don't come in completely cold. And for me, I can tell you're a genuinely good person, that you
Oh,
want good, and I just hope you're able to find it.
thank you so much, Larry.
No problem. So I would like to give you an opportunity to plug any and everything that you're doing. This actually will be released before that competition because I'm actually hoping that they're done with my website by next weekend. So that gets done, I will push and pump because one thing I do is I sell. So I know how to get out there and market myself, and I work in an industry that deals with a ton of marketing. So yeah, plug yourself, and I'll push you as hard as I can.
Thank you very much for the platform. I will listen to urban homesteading. So, my name is Felicity Azura. I am the host of the world's first podcast on professional cuddling. It's called Pro Cuddle Hustle Podcast. Please review my podcast on Good Pods, but also all the other platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. I don't have a website for my podcast yet, but be patient. It's going to be beautiful when it's finally available. I can be reached via email at felicityazra@gmail.com. No capitalization, no underscore, no numbers. I am accepting cuddle bookings within the San Francisco Bay Area. I also accept Fly Me to Use as long as it's in the United States. And I I'm now offering double cuddles with my friend Jessica. We offer our doubles service in the South Bay of the Bay Area, so Silicon Valley, San Jose, that area. And I am a writer in addition to being a podcaster. I love to write about professional cuddling on Substack, and I love to write about sex work on Medium. My most recent Medium article is about Asian visibility in burlesque or lack thereof. And a lot of my rough drafts right now are about burlesque and my Asian like twist. And I would love to have some beta readers to give me feedback, preferably people with no affiliation to the burlesque, so they can be like, I have no idea what you mean. I need back in order to grow as a writer, so I could publish this anthology and have a beautiful and all that stuff. So I'm just incredibly grateful for every single person who's on my journey, whether it's my writing journey or burlesque journey or my professional cuddling journey or my podcasting journey. I could go on, but I'm just incredibly grateful for every person who supports me.
As you should be. I'm the same way myself.